On this episode of the Open in Indiana podcast, we meet a Jiu-Jitsu Academy owner with locations in Greenwood and Zionsville. Don't miss it. Welcome, everyone, to the Open in Indiana podcast, where we feature the people, places, and events that make Indiana a great place to live, work, and visit. Today, our guest is the owner of Indiana Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy, AJ Clingerman. AJ, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. AJ, thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, so AJ, let's talk about what you do with Indiana Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy.
Yeah, so we actually have two locations. We have Indiana Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy in Greenwood, Indiana, and then we have Endurance Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is in Zionsville. Indiana Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy has been open. It'll be 21 years in March of this year. So a very long time. And we offer jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, conditioning, wrestling, all those types of classes.
And so AJ, what is your background?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up dancing. I thought that when I, got out into the world, I would be a dance instructor and own a dance academy. That's what I thought it would be. Met my husband, obviously then boyfriend, and he was into jiu-jitsu and wanted to own a jiu-jitsu school. Very similar, really, as far as like business model goes. And so we decided to, join forces. And in 2000, we opened the Indiana Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy. I did not really do jiu-jitsu much before we owned the school, but I'm definitely obsessed with it by this point in time.
And so AJ, let's talk a little bit about that process, because since we're connected on social media, I see you're quite an accomplished person in jiu-jitsu.
Thank you. Yeah, I am a brown belt. I just received my brown belt at the end of last year. I, as a purple belt, won both PANS, which is one of the most prestigious jiu-jitsu tournaments. I won that last year, and I also won Worlds. So I'm very active as far as competition goes. I also have the largest women's team in Indiana, one of the largest in the country. I run a lot of women's only events as well. I teach a lot of self-defense. I work with IMPD a lot and a lot of other companies like real estate agents and the library and just a lot of private companies teaching self-defense classes as well. So that's kind of what I spend most of my time doing, is teaching and growing the team.
And so AJ, let's talk a little bit about what you've learned since you've gotten your business up and running. What's one piece of advice that you'd like to offer anyone who's just starting out today?
Honestly, I think the biggest piece of advice is get a coach. When we opened the school, we kind of had that, like if you build it, they will come mentality. We were the only school in central Indiana doing what we were doing at the time. There were karate schools or taekwondo schools, but there was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mixed martial arts academies. And we just thought, here we are, like everybody should come to us. And to an extent, that was true, as far as like people were driving 2 or 3 hours to get to us, because that they knew what they wanted, but we didn't know how to market to the people directly behind us, like in the neighborhoods around us. And not until we got a coach did we really learn how to build the business portion of it. So I think my biggest piece of advice is find a mentor, find a coach, and work with somebody to help you actually build the business side. We're all good. We get into a business because of the craft, right? Like because we like something, we want to do that thing and we want to make our passions into our business. But most of the time we don't get into business because we're actually business owners. And so find somebody who's, been on that path before, and, hire a good coach. That's my best piece of advice.
Awesome. And AJ, let's ask real quick, what is one of your biggest goals for this year?
Yeah. Well, definitely competing, from a personal standpoint, I would like to get back out. Just getting my brown belt, I would like to do the big tournaments, break that in. From a business standpoint, I'd like to be able to get back out and do more self-defense. With 2020 was a kind of a weird world and not a lot of companies were bringing me in person. So whether I do more self-defense online or, in private settings, I definitely want to get back out there and start teaching more people how to defend themselves.
Awesome. And so AJ, how can our viewers and listeners contact you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I'm AJ Clingerman everywhere on social media. And you can find our website. It's ibjja.com. That goes for Indiana Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy, as well as endurancebjj.com.
Awesome. Well, AJ, thank you so much for being our guest today. And to everyone watching and listening, thank you for catching this episode of the Open in Indiana podcast. Catch our next episode soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Open in Indiana podcast. If you enjoyed listening, subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Music, iHeartRadio, or on our website, openindiana.com/OII podcast. Thanks for listening.